Hello, welcome to All Things Change. I am Wendy Holtmark, and I'm getting things started here on LinkedIn and on Facebook. I am just checking to see how we're doing with the feed. And there we are. Great. Okay. Hello again. Welcome to All Things Change. This is a conversation with women leading in today's changing world. Lots of fascinating topics that we can, potentially cover in this forum. I love having guests on, like we have today with our friend Mina Shams, just to dig in on, the topics of the time as relates to being a woman in leadership in today's changing world. And Mina is an HR consultant and has had a very long and successful career as an HR leader in companies in different industries. And today's topic is about organizational culture. And specifically, in my world as a coach, I hear from a lot of clients who struggle with the culture of their organization. Maybe they've recently started a new job, and they're not comfortable with the culture, or the culture has changed in a direction that they're not comfortable with. But it's a very interesting intersection, I think, between culture and individual, and what that means for our careers specifically. We can look at culture, I think, through the perspective of being leaders and driving culture, but how that impacts our lives individually is also an interesting topic. So as we go, Mina, I'll peek at the chat. We already have a warm welcome from Fahima, someone we both know very well. I'd love to hear from others. Where are you calling in from, or dialing in from, I should say? And as you have contributions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be peeking at that as we go, or any questions for Mina or myself. And Mina, I'd love just to start, just if you could share just an overview with us about, the types of places you've worked, and roles that you've held.
Sure, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be here and talking to you guys. I probably have over 25 years of experience in HR. I've worked in many industries, but I'd say primary healthcare and defense. And healthcare, I have worked for GE Healthcare for about 7 years in New Jersey. I worked for an orthopedics company in San Diego called Dondre Orthopedics. And also did a lot of consulting. I would say mainly also in healthcare. A lot of companies locally in San Diego, or very few that are global, that are setting up offices in California. As we all know, country California is a little different than the rest of the country. So different role. I mean, I honestly started as a recruiting coordinator in New Jersey back in the 90s, and just move up my career progression. And my last full-time position was a VP of HR for about 2,500 employees at that time, and about a $800 million revenue. And at GE was $35 million revenue and about 20,000 employees. And I've worked with
Mm,
clients that have only 30 employees. So I have worked in different industries and different size organizations, and I've been able to adjust my style to make
mhm.
sure I meet their needs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I thought it'd be so cool to talk to you. I mean, when I hear healthcare and defense in the same sentence, I mean, like I just can't help but think about culture, and how those must be quite different. So what did you observe there?
So I worked in healthcare for many years. I'm like, I need a change. I mean, I'm very comfortable in healthcare. I understand a lot of aspects of what they do. I'm like, I want to be challenged. So I'm in my, at that time, I think I was in my late 40s, and I wanted a change. And there was an opportunity in defense. And I applied to it and got the job. And so what I did not recognize was how, like you're saying, how the industries are so different. So, and I thought in defense, I'm like, hey, it's a government contractor. You're going to have all the money you want, bring all the programs, and for retention, or to make sure the business is growing. It was totally different because in healthcare, firstly, the leadership team, it's very, very diverse.
Mhm.
As we all know, defense was really big between 50s and 80s. What do you think is the C-suite, right? So they're all they're not diverse, and
Mhm.
it's not their fault because I mean that's how the business have grown. And um, so when I took the defense job, I honestly struggled for the first 6 months. I was like going home sometimes being so upset and sometimes even crying. I'm like, why am I working in this industry? This is not fun. I had 6 buildings that I managed. I walked around. It was just like really, really depressing. And I'm like, I need to go back to healthcare. And then I'm like, wait, I want to be challenged. I mean, this is my
Mhm.
challenge. So
Mm.
coming from very comfortable healthcare and knowing everything and being very diverse, and here I am with a middle-aged men I'm working with, extremely talented engineers, mainly electrical engineers or software engineers, and there I am as head of HR, the only female in the room probably they ever had at that level.
Mm.
I honestly really struggled. But then I was able to identify some programs and stuff that I could do, which I thought I had money, but there wasn't anything. And then the workforce was very diverse, but they were all isolated. So if you worked in building 6, you never went to building 4 because 6 was production and 4 is engineering. So you don't talk to each other, even when you
Mhm.
work on the same product. So yeah, absolutely, totally different and very shocking to me.
Yeah. So so tell me more about that transition in your approach because at first it sounded like you were really discouraged about it and questioning the decision to enter a role in that company in that industry. And then it sounds like you did have a shift of, wait a minute, this is the challenge here that I want to challenge. So tell me more about that change for you.
Sure, absolutely. So one thing, so the leadership team was different. So I was when I went to like employee meetings and stuff, and I started going to the meetings, and one of the founders was working for the company, really, really intelligent engineer and stuff. So they were like totally ignoring me. It's like a first female there helping them. Because I question, I mean, as you get older, you learn that you don't have to have all the solutions.
Mm,
Like, it doesn't matter what level you are, you just have to ask the right questions with empathy. So
yes.
you can be like arrogant, say, hey, I'm a VP of HR. I never use my title, never.
Hmm.
To anybody, I'm like, I work in HR. So what I started doing is I learned that the employees were not talking to each other. The
Hmm.
groups, the head of engineering today, the engineering is important. I don't care. So the first session I had was like having all the leaders together, even just talking about their styles and stuff. I realized I couldn't really do much there. And my new boss and the other 11 VPs, the F bombs and the S bombs were there. I was
Mm.
so uncomfortable. So I actually pulled my leader that I was reporting to, and I asked him, I'm like, can you help me understand why you have to swear all the time? He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, that's what's wrong with that? He's like, well, I know. It's like, and the other, he's like, well, you know, that's you obviously mean you're new in defense. Obviously, you don't know anything about defense. This is very common. He's like, that's in our vocabulary. But I'm like, why? So I kept on asking him, not
Yeah.
telling him what. At one point, I'm like, how would you feel if you're sitting in a meeting and an employee is presenting and throwing F bombs? And then he just like, he's like, oh, gee. And he's like, well, no, I don't think it'd be appropriate for employees. But I'm like, for you, it's appropriate. I mean,
Yeah.
he thought about it. So when I came home and told my husband, I'm like, oh, I got to do something. I think I got Andy's ear. He's really listening to me now.
Yeah.
So when I went next day and I told them, I said, hey, then I'm like, you guys got to stop swearing. And they're like, what? No, 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 no. I'm like, moving forward from today on, if anybody swears, here's a jar, and you have to put in $20 in that jar. So there was a lot of resistance and stuff, but I just for that level, the my GM recognized like, okay, no, this is not the right thing to do. But I didn't
Mm,
come with that solution. I kept on asking him questions. So
mhm,
what we make that long story short, I was actually able to shift their style.
mm.
So there were less and less swearing, and the CEO showed up one day. She said, "Hey, Mina, I hear that you're collecting money if we swear." I said, "Well, I'm not collecting money if nobody swears." So I said, "There's no need to be any money if you guys don't swear." And it was funny. So that was like it came so popular. If somebody will swear, they're like, "Ooh, is Mina in the room?" They're like, "Oh, no, 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 no." And then I'll find out. So that was like I think was the easiest way. And I used to go to a lot of program reviews and stuff, and there were less and less swear. Or if somebody
Mhm.
swear, they'll apologize to me. I'm like, oh no, you don't have to apologize to me. Apologize to the whole room
Right.
because 99% of them are all male and they thought it was about me. I'm like, no. So like small stuff like that really helped. And then we had like I call it open forum where we invited employees from different buildings to come talk to us. So one of the saddest moment was we had one employee that came to the room. She was there like over 20 years, and she looked at me and looked at the GM. She's like, you know what? I've been here 20 plus years. I have never been to this building, and I have never been to this conference room. And that
Mhm.
conference room was there since 1983, and this is 2013, 2014 we're talking about.
Wow.
Yeah,
There's so much in those examples that I wanna reflect on, and, one the first thing that comes to my mind is, if you were in the defense industry, I'm guessing there were probably a lot of ex-military, and I know being married to a retired military officer that the language can be really colorful, quite not just swears, but quite creative, colorful,
oh yes,
swear.
nasty
So
jokes. Yep.
I'm not surprised to hear that came up for you. But also, I love this about, asking questions rather than, you know, immediately coming with a solution because it assumes that there's a problem and maybe there is, but people don't always respond well when the mirror that's held up to them doesn't show a nice reflection, right?
Right, right.
And but that's the other thing that occurs to me is that you held up that mirror and said you wouldn't, how would you feel if an employee, a junior, level employee came in and started swearing during a presentation? Well, I wouldn't like that. Well, then why are
Yeah.
you doing it? And just raising that awareness by giving that reflection, I think, is really powerful. And I'm putting myself in the potential perspective of someone watching this who's not in HR, where there's some perspective or perception maybe that, well, that's HR, that's something HR would do or say, is to kind of moderate language and appropriateness and professionalism. However, I think what I see is that a lot of people coming into a new culture could have influence in a similar way, in um, a different realm, by holding up that mirror and asking. What do you think about that?
Are you asking me that or are you asking the audience?
I'm asking you, Mina, what you think about people who might not feel empowered to change culture. What might they be able to do to influence if they find themselves in a culture that they're questioning somehow?
Yeah, I would say like find out more about the company, what's going on. Is this something
Mhm.
new? Because sometimes when you have new leadership team, things change, right? Because in the past, it could have been much better or it could have been worse.
Yeah.
Just maybe even if your boss has been there for a while and they could ask him like, hey, how the organization changed, what happened that people are behaving this way, because I see three of my colleagues have left the company and they were here long term. What happened? I think it'd be
Yeah.
like more questioning.
Yeah.
And I must say again, I started questioning more when I got older. And when you're younger, you fear. I'm like,
Mhm.
sometimes even in meetings, you may have the best idea.
Yeah.
You don't want to say anything. You're like, well, I bet if I say it wrong, I bet if it's the wrong thing, they're going to look at me and say, hey, this individual is not
Yeah.
intelligent, or they don't know what's going in an organization. Like, I think just asking questions. One of my favorite things was to do, we didn't even have a cafeteria, but we had employees that brought in their lunches and stuff. So this I'm talking about, a site that has 1,200 employees.
Mhm.
Just like going talking to employees. I don't care what level you are, you go ask employees, you get them in a they're not expecting you to be in the lunchroom with them while they're eating lunch. And I go sit there. I'm like, oh my God, that looks so great. What are you eating? And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, how long you been here? What do you like about here? What
Mm.
keeps you here? Kind of questions.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think some of that stuff would definitely help
Yeah.
find out more about the company, and then knowing what their needs are. Probably making recommendations, right? So I'm like, hey, about like, if we have employees, if they're photographers, maybe let's have a contest and have the employees bring their artwork, and we could hang the five best one in the lunchroom or in the hallways or in the reception area. It's not costing you anything,
Yeah.
but you have the employee engagement. So it's like, oh, when I walk in the hallways, I'm like, oh my God.
I have,
This is Joe's
uh,
artwork, or this is Ping Ping's art. I think we're on delayed.
yeah, yeah, we lost you a little bit, but what I think I heard you saying was, that through these conversations with employees, you can really make small changes that lead to better engagement. Um, let me just pause and reflect back some of the comments that we're getting in. So Jacqueline T says Mina is a great coach and influencer for positive change, and Fahima really relates to the experience in the defense industry as a challenge to navigate, and has fond memories of the swear jar. um, one thing I want to explore with you, Mina. I heard about this both in my career in HR as well as a coach. Um, I think it's really hard when you're interviewing to really get a good feel for the culture, because in some ways everybody's performing. As a candidate, you're performing, wanting to, put your best foot forward and appear positive and excited about the opportunity. And as an interviewer, you don't want to reveal too many negative things about the culture because you're trying to um, attract somebody. And so then I think, and I would also add that people who have worked someplace for a while lose a sense of what the culture is because they are the culture at that
Right.
point,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, when I think about culture and ways to feel out, I mean, I think about, exploring how are decisions made, how do people seem to feel about change? Do they see it as a threat or an opportunity? What gets rewarded around here? These are things that, come to my mind. May not be the most comfortable questions to ask as a candidate, but maybe, things you can explore behind the scenes. But what do you think somebody applying for a new job can explore or try to find out in order to get a really good feel for the culture?
I would say definitely look up the C-suite if you can. I think that's
Mm,
really important. If you want a really good culture, you want to make sure that the business is growing. Look at the C-suite. Honestly, I think that makes a really, really big difference. Like if you have a diverse C-suite, there's really good opportunities within that organization to have a better culture versus everybody looks the same and they've been there
mhm.
30 years.
Yep.
You don't, you would love to see a lot of change, making sure it's a good cultural fit as well. I think it's a little bit challenging because I just had this recent client, great company. I worked there for 1 week. I'm like, I'm sorry. The C-suite was just, unfortunately, was a woman running it. Was so sad.
Mhm.
She had created such a toxic work environment, and I talked to a few people, and they're like, "Oh no, if I could get a job, I'll leave."
Mm.
I think that's really important. Just going even on their link page and see how often they put information about the employees, right? I think it's the career page is really critical to look at what kind of
Mhm.
information they have there. Even if it's a small startup company, sometimes they do a really good job of putting information about the company. If it's especially if it's publicly held company, you could do
Mhm.
a lot of research on the company before you accept the job.
Yeah.
Um, especially if you most of us don't go to the office anymore, but if you have the opportunity of going to the office, ask them for a tour. If you could get tour of the production floor, or if it's the labs and stuff, just I
Mhm.
think the people, and I think if it's a good culture, you could see that enthusiasm in employees eyes. You don't even have to talk to employees, just walking around.
Yeah.
I've seen that that's being really helpful, finding out what kind of
Mm.
organization it is, and if it's a good fit for you or not, because it's like it's not always about comp, right? So
Yeah.
maybe, yeah.
It's so true. You can really get a feel just by the physical environment and looking into the faces of the employees who are there and picking up what energy they have and their, satisfaction and happiness and I think that's also a great tip just, just having a look at who is in the C-suite and what does that represent, I've worked for companies that have made some, gradual but significant changes with that, and it has made a huge difference in terms of, the impact on the culture. So I can definitely see that. So we're rounding out to the last few minutes of our conversation. So I'm just going to encourage people if they have a question for Nina or myself, throw it in the chat and we will come to it before we close. But I'd love just to, reflect on some of the takeaways from this conversation, Nina, that I have and what you'd like to add to it for our audience. And then I'll make a few announcements before we wrap up.
Sure.
But so I think what I'm picking up on is if you find yourself in an organization where you have concerns or questions about the culture, there are things you can do to influence that. Recognizing that, based on your level, there may be some situations where that's not entirely comfortable or doesn't feel safe to do. But asking questions, open questions, and not rushing to, solving a problem is certainly a successful approach that has worked for you. And then ways to prevent that kind of mismatch from happening at the outset include, just really assessing who those senior leaders are, how diverse, that population is, getting a feel for the physical environment, talking to employees and understanding what it is they like or don't like. So I really appreciate those points that you hit. And I wonder what you would like to add for our audience in terms of takeaways.
Sure. I think the other thing would be always to have a colleague. It could be your level or a different level that you could talk to, especially if you're a new hire, find out more information. Of there like some programs asking like, hey, when did this program come around and how I could support it? Because sometimes employees have such a great ideas, and we don't ask the questions, or we don't ask for volunteers. So if we could also talk to employees and find out about different programs and stuff, and also how you could contribute. And also if you're getting, if you want to be like a mentor, I think it's really important. And also like a buddy program, if there isn't one, or if there's one, to volunteer, talk to HR
Mm,
and say, hey, I want to be a buddy for a new hire, or
yeah,
asking people, hey, can I have a buddy? Can I talk to somebody from, I don't know, supply chain? So
yeah.
I think, and some of that stuff I think would really help influencing. And also as a new hire, like I said, I struggled the first 6 months somebody that you could go to and talk to. I think those would be really helpful as well.
Yeah, totally agree that connection with other people during a time when you're learning an organization is so critical. And as you say, that's something that you can offer to be to somebody else. And that's, contributing to a positive culture as well as, just enhancing your experience as a leader and really reflecting on, why is it we do what we do here, right? So, so many great pieces there. So thanks, Mina.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining today.
My pleasure. That's
Yeah.
great.
So, just a couple of announcements for people listening live or later. For more information about how working with a coach can help you navigate things around cultural challenges, check out my website, wendyholtmark.com. And I'm also excited to announce I'm going to be running a free 3-day, 3 mini session training next week, Tuesday through Thursday, 4:30 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern, just little bite-sized nuggets of leadership development, totally free. So you can register for that on my website as well as for Lead for Lasting Impact, which is a really exciting new group program I'm starting for women in leadership that kicks off on February 28th. So thank you, and thank you to those engaging with the chat, and thank you again, Mina, for joining today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay,
Thank you,
take
everyone.
care.
Thank you, Jackie, Fahima.